In the darkest corner of the galaxy, Earth had become little more than a footnote in a long history of war. The great powers, the Zephyr Dominion, the Rilnor Empire, and others, fought endless battles for control over the stars, but Earth was just a backwater, a forgotten world, seen as weak and incapable. Humanity had been sidelined, relegated to the outer edges of galactic politics. But Earth had something none of the other factions expected: its misfits. In the shadows of war, a team of individuals was about to change the fate of the universe. They weren't soldiers. They weren't trained professionals. They were outcasts, criminals, hackers, ex-soldiers, and rebels, all united by one simple thing. They had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. These misfits, these outcasts, were Earth's only hope. Captain James "Jax" Harris stood at the front of a rundown spaceport, watching the stars flicker above. His once pristine uniform now hung loosely around his frame, stained with the marks of a soldier long forgotten. His eyes, though tired, still burned with a determination he never thought he'd have again. He was a former soldier, discharged for insubordination, a man whose actions had been deemed too reckless for the military's taste. But what they didn't realize was that his recklessness had saved countless lives. Beside him stood his team. Mia, a brilliant hacker who had once turned her back on the government to help people escape its tyranny. Zane, a former criminal with a talent for improvisation and a sharp tongue that had made him a few enemies. Leah, a former medical officer with a past she couldn't escape, haunted by the ghosts of the wounded she couldn't save. And then there was Ezra, a technician who could fix anything, except his own broken heart. Each of them had a reason for being here, a reason they couldn't escape. Earth had abandoned them, but they hadn't abandoned Earth. "We're going in blind," Jack said, breaking the silence. His voice was rough, but there was something steady in it, something that made the others listen. "We don't have reinforcements. We don't have support. We do this on our own, or we die trying." The others exchanged looks. They knew the stakes. The Zephyr Dominion, a brutal alien race, had been ravaging nearby planets, and Earth had been deemed expendable. No one expected Earth's misfits to make it far. They were too weak, too inexperienced. But they weren't about to let that stop them. "We'll make it work," Maya said, tapping away at her console. "We always do." Zane cracked a grin. "Maybe we'll show the galaxy what Earth is really made of." His tone was sarcastic, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. As they boarded their shuttle, there was a palpable tension in the air. The misfits were used to fighting alone, but this was different. This was their first real mission as a team, and the odds were stacked against them. The galaxy had underestimated Earth. Now, they would have to prove the galaxy wrong. The shuttle jolted as it launched into the atmosphere, and they quickly left the relative safety of Earth's orbit. They headed for the front lines, a world caught between two warring factions, the Zephyr Dominion and a race known as the Taldari. Earth had been sent to this war zone, not because it was capable, but because it was expendable. The Zephyr Dominion saw it as a convenient pawn in their never-ending war. And the Taldari saw the Terrans as weak and predictable. Both sides thought they could wipe out Earth's misfits with ease. As the shuttle soared through space, Leah leaned over the control panel, studying the readouts. "This isn't just a battle," she muttered under her breath. "It's a slaughter." Jax nodded, his expression grim. "We're not here to win. We're here to survive. And if we get a chance to hurt the Dominion, we take it." The shuttle shuddered as it entered the war zone. The planet below was a patchwork of broken cities and scorched earth. The sky above it was thick with smoke, the remnants of countless battles. The misfits didn't flinch. They were used to this, used to seeing the chaos and violence that the galaxy had become. But this wasn't just another war. This was their chance to prove themselves. As they approached the landing site, Jax's mind raced. The mission was simple: gather intel, disrupt enemy forces, and stay alive. But there was something else, something unspoken. Deep down, He knew that this mission was more than just a fight for survival. It was Earth's first real chance to stand up to the galaxy. The shuttle's engines screamed as they descended through the atmosphere. The ground below was a sea of destruction. The Dominion's forces were everywhere, their war machines lumbering across the battlefield. They were preparing for another attack, unaware that the Misfits had landed on their doorstep. Jax's fingers tightened around the control panel. He could hear the others getting ready, each of them preparing for the battle to come. They were ready for whatever the galaxy could throw at them. But what they didn't know was that the real fight had only just begun. As the shuttle touched down, the Misfits made their way to the exit. The doors opened with a hiss, and they stepped onto the shattered ground. The air was thick with smoke, and the distant sounds of gunfire echoed across the barren landscape. They moved quickly, keeping to the shadows, using the cover of wreckage to make their way deeper into enemy territory. They knew the risks. They knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but they also knew something that the Dominion didn't. They had nothing to lose. "This is it," Jax said, his voice low. "Let's show the galaxy what Earth's made of." And just like that, they were off, moving into the heart of the battlefield. The galaxy had underestimated them, written them off as misfits. But now, the misfits of Earth were about to prove the universe wrong. As they advanced through the war zone, the misfits knew that every step they took could be their last. The Dominion's forces were vast and merciless, but they weren't ready for what Earth's misfits had in store. No one had ever expected these outcasts to do anything but fail. But failure wasn't an option. Not for them. Not for Earth. The battle was just beginning, and the misfits of Earth would show the galaxy that even the most underestimated, the most broken, could rise up and take control of the battlefield. The misfits of Earth had no illusions about their chances. They weren't the best, they weren't even close to the strongest, but they had one thing that no one else seemed to understand: the will to survive and the ingenuity to make the impossible possible. Each member of the team had their own scars, both physical and emotional, from their past lives. None of them had ever expected to be here, on the front lines of a war that was not their own, fighting for a cause that no one believed in. But now, they had no choice. This was their last chance to make a difference. Jax led the group as they crouched low behind a pile of smoldering debris. The battlefield was littered with the wreckage of destroyed vehicles, burning buildings, and fallen soldiers. The once thriving city was now nothing more than a graveyard. It was a far cry from the Earth they had once known, but none of them had the luxury of nostalgia. They were here to fight, to survive, and to prove that even Earth's misfits could take on the might of the galaxy. "You sure we're not walking into a trap?" Zane asked, his voice low and laced with skepticism. He was always the one to question things, always the one to throw in a bit of doubt. It was his way of coping with the fact that he was often the first to jump into trouble. Jax didn't answer immediately, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. His mind was racing, thinking of all the ways this could go wrong. They had no intel, no backup, and the Dominion's forces were everywhere. But that was nothing new. The team had fought worse odds before. This mission wasn't about success. It was about survival. "Stay sharp," Jax finally said. "We can't afford to let our guard down." Mia, the hacker, was already working on her console, her fingers moving quickly as she hacked into the Dominion's communications network. She was the quiet one of the group, always focused, always calculating. She had a knack for finding the smallest weakness in a system and exploiting it. It was a skill that had served them well more than once. "I've got something," Maya said, her voice steady. "The Dominion's forces are spread thin. They don't expect us to hit them so soon." "Then let's make it count," Jax said. "We hit hard, fast, and leave before they even know what happened." The team moved out, cautiously making their way deeper into the enemy territory. Each step was carefully calculated, every sound, every movement analyzed. They had no idea what they were walking into, but they couldn't hesitate. They had come too far to back out now. The first skirmish came faster than they expected. A group of Dominion soldiers appeared from around a corner, their weapons raised. They were ready to fight, but they weren't prepared for what Earth's Misfits had in store. Without a word, Jax's team sprang into action. Zane was the first to move, his quick reflexes allowing him to take down one of the soldiers before they could even react. Leah, the medic, wasn't just there to patch up wounds. She had a keen eye for tactics, and she used that to her advantage, taking out another soldier with a precise shot. Ezra, the technician, used his knowledge of alien technology to hack into the Dominion's gear, turning their own weapons against them. Maya provided the digital support, jamming communications and creating chaos in the Dominion's ranks. In a matter of minutes, the Misfits had wiped out the small patrol, leaving nothing but the bodies of their fallen enemies. The silence that followed was deafening. "Nice work," Jax said, his voice low but filled with pride. "Let's keep moving." They didn't have time to rest. The battle was far from over, and the Dominion would soon realize they were being attacked by Earth's Misfits. But for the first time, the Misfits felt like they were making a real difference. They weren't just pawns in someone else's game. They were the ones calling the shots now. As they moved deeper into the city, they encountered more resistance. The Dominion wasn't going to just let them walk in and destroy everything. They fought harder, using their superior numbers and firepower to push the Misfits back. But the Misfits weren't going down that easily. They used every trick in the book, from guerrilla tactics to setting traps, to outsmart their enemies. They didn't need to be better soldiers. They just needed to be smarter. But as the day wore on, it became clear that the Misfits were not just surviving. They were winning. They had broken through the Dominion's lines and were now deep behind enemy territory, causing chaos and confusion. The Dominion's leadership had underestimated them, thinking they were nothing more than a distraction. But what the Dominion didn't understand was that these Misfits had nothing to lose. They didn't care about honor or glory. They cared about survival. And in this war, that was more than enough. As night fell, Jax gathered his team together for a quick briefing. They had made significant progress, but the real test was yet to come. The Dominion would be regrouping, and they would be coming for them with everything they had. The Misfits had to be ready for whatever came next. "We've done well so far," Jax said, looking each member of his team in the eye. "But this isn't over. The Dominion won't let us get away with this." Mia nodded, her eyes focused. "I've disabled their communications, but that won't last long. We need to hit their command center before they can regroup." "We'll go in hard," Jax said. "We hit them with everything we've got. We don't stop until we've taken out their leadership." The team nodded in agreement. They were tired, battered, and running low on supplies, but they knew what had to be done. This was their chance to strike a blow against the Dominion, and they weren't going to waste it. As they moved toward the command center, a strange feeling began to settle over Jax. They had made it this far, against all odds. They had fought, bled, and sacrificed, but they had never backed down. They weren't the galaxy's most powerful warriors. They weren't the most skilled or the most disciplined, but they were Earth's Misfits, and they were about to show the universe just what that meant. The battle for Earth had begun, and this time, the Misfits weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. The night was thick with tension as Earth's Misfits crept toward their target. Every step they took was one closer to confronting the Dominion's most feared weapon, their command center. But there was no fear in their hearts. Not anymore. They had faced down death before and had learned to embrace it as a companion. The stakes had never been higher, yet their resolve remained unshakable. This was their fight now, and they would take the galaxy by storm if they had to. Zane's eyes were sharp, scanning the shadows as they approached a heavily fortified building in the heart of the city. The command center was protected by layers of security, armed guards, turrets, and automated defense systems designed to turn anyone who dared approach into a smoldering pile of ash. But none of that fazed him. He had seen worse in the depths of war. Worse had tried to break him, but he was still here, still standing. "We can't just walk through the front door," Leah whispered, her voice a low murmur. She was a healer, not a soldier, but her intuition for danger was unmatched. She had a way of sensing when the situation was going to spiral out of control, and right now she was alert. Mia was already at work, her fingers flying over the small portable console she had hooked up to the building's security system. "I've got eyes on their network," she said, her tone focused. "Give me a second." And there, I've bypassed the security grid. The perimeter's down for a minute, maybe less. "Perfect," Jax said, his voice commanding as always. "Move fast, keep quiet. We go in hard, we take them out fast." The team entered the compound with barely a sound, blending into the darkness like shadows. They moved swiftly through narrow corridors, their every step measured. Each member of the group had a role to play. Maya led the way, her hacking skills the key to bypassing the locked doors and bypassing high-tech security features. Zane, Leah, and Ezra were all focused on the task ahead, eyes constantly darting between their surroundings and the screens they carried. But Jax, as always, led with calm, unshakable certainty. His mind was constantly thinking ahead, calculating how to navigate every possible obstacle, even the ones they couldn't see. Their lives depended on him keeping them one step ahead of the enemy. The first group of guards came into view, unaware of the group's presence. Zane signaled to Jax, who gave the slight nod that meant they were ready. With deadly precision, they struck. Zane's blaster fired in rapid succession, taking down 2 guards before they could raise an alarm. Leah, not missing a beat, moved to check their vital signs. One was still breathing. "They're alive," Leah said softly, glancing at the rest of the team. "But we need to keep moving. If they wake up and call for reinforcements, we're not giving them that chance," Jax interjected firmly. They continued their silent advance, moving deeper into the heart of the compound. They reached a large chamber, a command hub filled with Dominion officers huddled over consoles and monitors. It was time for the real work to begin. Jax glanced at the team, eyes sharp with purpose. "On my mark." Mia tapped a few keys on her console, and suddenly, the Dominion systems were hers to control. "All cameras are offline," she confirmed. "Their communication systems are scrambled. They won't know what hit them." With a synchronized movement, the team stormed the room. Zane threw the first grenade, an EMP device that knocked out the enemy's weapons systems and sent a shockwave through the facility. The officers were caught off guard, and panic swept across their ranks. But it was too late. Leah moved quickly, firing at anything that moved. Her medical training might have focused on saving lives, but here, she knew her only duty was to stop the Dominion from fighting back. Ezra was equally ruthless, hacking into Dominion consoles to turn their automated defenses against them. It wasn't just about fighting. They were changing the game, turning their enemies' tools into their own. Jax and Zane pressed forward, taking down anyone who posed a threat. The Dominion officers didn't stand a chance. The Misfits were out for one thing only: total domination. The chaos spread quickly through the compound. What had started as a stealthy mission had quickly turned into an all-out assault. But to the Misfits, this wasn't chaos. It was control. They had taken the fight to the enemy's doorstep, and the Dominion had no idea how to handle it. Amid the destruction, Mia stayed cool under pressure. "They're trying to call for backup," she warned, eyes locked on the screen. "We've got minutes before the rest of their forces arrive." "We're not waiting around for reinforcements," Jax growled. "We finish this." Mia's fingers flew over the console, locking down the command center's main systems. She was already working on disabling the Dominion's reinforcements. With a few final keystrokes, the command center's command structure was completely disabled. "They won't be calling for help anymore," she said, her voice tinged with satisfaction. The Misfits were on a roll, their enemies left helpless. As Jax looked around at his team, his brothers and sisters in arms, he realized they were no longer just a group of misfits. They had become something more. They were a force that no one could ignore. "Let's finish this," Jax said. But just as they were about to move toward the next objective, the doors to the command center slammed open with a force that shook the entire room. A new group of Dominion soldiers entered, led by a tall figure, armored in black, with a scar running down his face, a face filled with fury and disbelief. "Did you think you could get away with this?" the leader barked. Jax's heart raced. It was a trap. This wasn't just a final line of defense. The Dominion had anticipated this move, but the Misfits didn't hesitate. "We didn't come here to escape," Jax said, his voice steady. "We came to win." And with that, the Misfits opened fire once more, ready to take on whatever came next. The firefight that followed was unlike anything the Misfits had ever faced. The Dominion's backup forces were formidable, a team of heavily armed soldiers who had been trained for every kind of combat scenario. But the Misfits weren't just any group of soldiers. They were a ragtag band of outcasts, misfits from every corner of the galaxy, bound together by a shared will to survive and a desire to prove that they were more than the sum of their past failures. Jax fired his blaster without hesitation, each shot hitting its mark with brutal accuracy. His movements were swift and calculated, as if every step he took was part of a well-rehearsed plan. Zane moved with the same intensity, his eyes never leaving the target, his hand steady as he took down one soldier after another. Leah, though more accustomed to saving lives than taking them, had found a strength in this mission that she hadn't known existed. She fired with precision, never faltering, as she ensured the team stayed protected. Mia's fingers danced across her console, her mind in perfect sync with the chaos around her. The room was filled with the sounds of gunfire and explosions, but she remained calm, focused on her task. She hacked into the Dominion's mainframe, scrambling their communication channels and disabling their reinforcements. But even as the Dominion soldiers fell one by one, she couldn't shake the feeling that something much worse was coming. Ezra, his eyes scanning the room with a ruthless edge, was the one who first noticed it. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Something wasn't right. He turned his head just in time to see the massive doors at the back of the command center opening again. This time, it wasn't more soldiers that entered the room. It was something far more dangerous. A figure stepped into the room, tall and imposing, dressed in black armor that shimmered with an unsettling energy. The Dominion's elite, a new breed of soldier that the Misfits had never encountered before. They were designed to be the ultimate weapon, a mix of advanced technology and genetically enhanced strength. This was no ordinary commander. This was the true leader, the one who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes, and he was coming for them. The Misfits took a step back, eyes wide in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had anticipated resistance, sure, but this was a different level entirely. The figure's voice was deep and cold, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You think you can challenge the Dominion? You, a group of outcasts, of misfits who have no place in the galaxy's order. You are nothing." Jax's jaw tightened, and he stepped forward, not intimidated by the man's words. "You're wrong," he said, his voice unwavering. "We're not nothing. We're everything you've underestimated." The figure's laugh was chilling. "You'll die here, just like all the others who thought they could stand against us. The Dominion is eternal." Leah's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. She was ready. They all were. This was the moment they had been fighting for. This was the test to prove that they were not just survivors, but warriors in their own right. With a signal from Jax, the Misfits fell into their formation, their weapons at the ready. The battle had only just begun, but the outcome would not be decided by strength alone. It would be decided by their will to fight and the bonds they had forged through years of struggle. The elite Dominion soldier charged first, his weapon raised, the sound of his boots thundering across the floor as he closed in on the Misfits. Zane fired his blaster, aiming for the soldier's chest, but the shots bounced off the soldier's advanced armor, leaving no mark. Ezra, quick to assess the situation, grabbed a nearby piece of debris and hurled it at the soldier. The impact caused the figure to stagger, giving the Misfits a brief opening. Leah took advantage, rushing in with a series of rapid, precise shots aimed at the soldier's joints. Still, the figure pressed forward, shrugging off the attacks as if they were nothing. Jax knew that brute force wouldn't be enough. This soldier was different. He was a machine. It was time to change tactics. "Fall back," Jax ordered, and the Misfits quickly complied. They didn't retreat out of fear, but out of necessity. They needed to regroup to think. The soldier was powerful, but even the most advanced weapon could be outsmarted. And that's where the Misfits had an advantage. Mia, her hands moving faster than ever, hacked into the facility systems. On unlocking the security doors, she said, her voice steady despite the tension, "We'll use the environment against him." The Dominion soldier advanced again, but this time, the Misfits were ready. As the doors opened, a cascade of security drones flooded into the room. These drones were designed for crowd control, but the Misfits quickly turned them into allies, using their weapons to disable the machines and reprogram them to attack the soldier. The soldier hesitated for a split second, and that was all the Misfits needed. Zane dove into the fray, his blaster firing relentlessly as the drones closed in. Leah and Ezra worked together, using their quick thinking to set traps around the room, forcing the soldier into a corner. Jax moved with cold precision, waiting for the perfect moment. As the soldier struggled against the oncoming tide of drones and traps, Jax took his shot, hitting the soldier's helmet with a direct hit that cracked the black armor open. The elite soldier faltered, the visor of his helmet shattered, revealing a pair of glowing cybernetic eyes. The Misfits didn't give him a chance to recover. In a final, synchronized movement, they fired their weapons, striking the soldier down. As the figure crumpled to the ground, the command center fell silent. The Misfits stood, panting from the intensity of the battle, but victorious. The Dominion's elite had fallen, and the Misfits had proven that they were no longer just outcasts. They were warriors, underdogs who had triumphed over the impossible. "Mission accomplished," Jax said, his voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. But as they turned to leave, they knew this victory was only the beginning. The Dominion would not let this defeat stand for long, and the Misfits would be ready. The galaxy had underestimated them. Now, they would learn to fear the Misfits of Earth. The Misfits had barely caught their breath before the alarms in the command center blared to life again. The brief silence after their victory had been interrupted by the unmistakable sound of reinforcements, and this time, it wasn't just the usual Dominion soldiers that came rushing in. The doors slammed open, and a fresh wave of terrifying enemies entered the room, each one more advanced than the last. Jax stood tall, his hand gripping the blaster tighter, eyes narrowed. He knew this wasn't over yet. Their fight against the Dominion was far from finished, and it seemed like the galaxy would never give them a chance to rest. But the Misfits had proven time and again that they were capable of handling the impossible. They had taken on the Dominion's best, and now they would face the very worst. "Get ready," Jax ordered, his voice steady. "They won't stop until we're all dead. We're not giving them the satisfaction." Leah, who had always been more of a pacifist, looked over at him, her brows furrowed, but her resolve solid. "We've come this far. We're not backing down now." Ezra, ever the strategist, was already calculating their next move. "If we don't take them out now, we'll be sitting ducks." "Mia, what's the status on the escape route?" Mia was at her console, her fingers flying over the keys. Her face was set in a determined frown. "I've hacked into their systems before. I can do it again. But we'll need to buy ourselves some time. The backup reinforcements are on their way too, And this time, they're sending the heavy artillery. Zane let out a long, frustrated breath. We're outnumbered. And if that last soldier was any indication, these new ones are gonna be tougher. We can't fight them all head-on, Jack said, eyes scanning the room. But we can make them think we're more than they bargained for. We've done it before. We'll do it again. The Misfits quickly got to work, setting up traps around the room. They'd rigged the walls with explosives and booby traps, turning their own environment into an enemy's worst nightmare. Leah helped Mia patch into the building's surveillance system, tracking the incoming enemies as they approached, while Ezra mapped out their escape route, leading the team toward the most secure exit. They didn't have much time. The first wave of soldiers came rushing in through the back corridor, their heavy boots thundering as they charged forward, their blasters raised, ready to end the Misfits' mission once and for all. The Misfits took their positions, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The tension in the air was thick, each of them silently praying that their makeshift defenses would hold long enough. The first soldier entered the room, and before he even had a chance to raise his weapon, Zane fired. The blast sent the soldier flying across the room, his body slamming against the wall. The rest of the group followed suit, springing from the shadows and unleashing a hail of blaster fire. The sound of explosions and weapons fire filled the room as chaos erupted once again. The Dominion soldiers tried to retaliate, but they were unprepared for the intensity of the Misfits' counterattack. The traps worked. Explosions rocked the walls, sending soldiers tumbling to the ground. Some were caught in the crossfire of their own weapons as the Misfits moved quickly, ducking and weaving, dodging shots as they targeted the weakest points in their enemies' defenses. Leah and Zane worked in perfect synchrony, their weapons cutting down enemies with precise, practiced shots. Mia, though far from a fighter, had found herself more at ease in this chaotic situation than she had ever imagined. Her role as the tech genius had always kept her behind the scenes, but now she was thrust into the middle of it, her fingers moving faster than ever, making sure the traps and security systems worked in their favor. She disabled their enemies' comms once more, and this time she was able to turn the Dominion's own turrets against them, shifting the tide of the battle. But the Misfits' victory came with a price. As they continued to hold the line, their weapons slowly began to run out of power, and their movements were starting to slow from exhaustion. They had no choice but to keep fighting, even when every bone in their bodies screamed for them to stop. The reinforcements kept coming, and the Misfits could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on them. Just when it seemed like their chances of survival were dwindling, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The Dominion soldiers' weapons fired one last time, but their shots hit nothing but air. The room filled with a new, deafening sound, the roar of a massive warship's engines as it descended from above, cutting through the atmosphere. The ship's lights were blinding, casting an eerie glow over everything. The Misfits' eyes turned to the sky, unsure of what to expect. They had no idea what was happening, but it was clear that their situation had just gone from bad to worse. The ship landed with a thunderous crash, shaking the entire building. The Dominion soldiers paused in confusion, looking up at the massive warship that had just landed in their midst. They had expected reinforcements, but this was different. No one could have predicted this kind of arrival. From the warship's hatch, a figure stepped forward, a figure the Misfits had seen before, a figure they knew all too well. It was the same soldier, the one they had fought before, the one they had almost defeated earlier. But now he wasn't alone. This was no longer just a group of outcasts taking on an empire. The Misfits were now facing the entire force of the Dominion. Every soldier, every weapon, every system under their control, all converging on their position. Jax's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing to keep up with the sudden shift in the situation. He turned to the team, his expression grim but resolute. "We fight," he said, his voice steady. "We fight like we've never fought before. This is where we make our stand." The Misfits knew there was no turning back now. The Dominion had underestimated them once, But now, they would learn that underestimating the Misfits of Earth was a mistake they would never live to regret. The battlefield had just become their playground, and they were ready to take it by storm. The Misfits had fought harder than ever before, and now, standing face to face with the massive force of the Dominion, they were about to see just how far their resolve would take them. Jax stood tall, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the battlefield. The Dominion soldiers had regrouped, their weapons raised and their movements coordinated, but the Misfits had something they didn't: unity. The Misfits were all different. They came from different backgrounds, different walks of life, but in this moment, they were a single, unstoppable force. Jax's mind raced as the figure in front of them, the soldier they had faced before, stepped out from the ship's hatch. This time, he wasn't alone. The warrior was flanked by several others, each more menacing than the last. The odds seemed insurmountable, but Jax knew that the Misfits had one thing the Dominion didn't: heart. "We've got this," Leah said, her voice steady, even though her fingers tightened on her blaster. "We've taken on worse." Mia, who had only recently found her courage, nodded firmly. "We've survived so far. We aren't stopping now." The figure at the front, the Dominion leader they had fought before, studied the Misfits with cold, calculating eyes. His voice, when he spoke, was laced with disdain. "You truly believe you can stop us? You are nothing. Just outcasts, misfits, as they say." Jax locked eyes with him, his jaw clenched. "Maybe we're outcasts, but we're the ones who are going to send you packing. You're not the ones in control anymore." The Dominion leader smirked, clearly underestimating the power of the team that stood before him. With a swift motion, he signaled to his soldiers, and they all raised their weapons in unison, preparing for a final assault. But the Misfits weren't about to let them take the first move. Without a word, Zane and Leah bolted into action. Their weapons fired in rapid succession, distracting the soldiers and forcing them to duck behind cover. The others followed suit, engaging in a furious firefight that rattled the very foundation of the battlefield. The sounds of blaster fire echoed in the air as the two sides clashed, the Misfits refusing to back down despite the overwhelming numbers they faced. Maya worked furiously at the controls, hacking into the Dominion systems once more, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. The Misfits had no time to waste. If they didn't act fast, they would be out of options. The Dominion soldiers were strong, heavily armored, and well-trained, but they lacked the unity and adaptability of the Misfits. Jax, who had been on the front lines from the very beginning, knew that they had to hit the Dominion where it hurt, at the heart of their organization. "We need to take down their leader," Jax said to Ezra, his voice low and urgent. "If we can get to him, we can cripple their command structure." Ezra nodded, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "I've got a plan," he said, already plotting the best way to infiltrate the enemy's ranks. "We'll take him down together. You just stay sharp." With a quick glance, Jax gave the signal. They moved in perfect harmony, their attacks precise and coordinated. They worked their way through the ranks of Dominion soldiers, taking them out one by one. Each misfit was a force to be reckoned with, and together, they were unstoppable. As they neared the leader's position, Jax's pulse quickened. They were close now, just a few more meters, and they would have the upper hand. But the Dominion leader wasn't about to go down easily. He turned to face them, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can defeat me? You've been nothing but a thorn in our side. You're weak," he spat. But Jax was undeterred. "We're stronger than you think." With a battle cry, the Misfits surged forward, determined to finish what they had started. The Dominion leader raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Leah and Zane attacked from opposite sides, disarming him in one swift move. The leader struggled to get up, but Jax was there in an instant, his boot pressing down on the enemy's chest as he pointed his blaster directly at him. "You underestimated Earth's misfits," Jax said, his voice cold as ice. "And now you pay the price." The Misfits had done it. Against all odds, they had defeated the Dominion leader. But the fight wasn't over yet. They could hear the sound of more Dominion ships descending from the sky, bringing with them more soldiers, more firepower. The Misfits had won this battle, but they knew the war was far from over. "We've bought ourselves some time," Maya said, her voice tight with urgency. "But we need to get out of here, fast." Jax nodded, signaling to the team. "We're not done yet, but we'll fight for as long as it takes. This is our fight now." With the Dominion leader subdued, the Misfits turned their attention to the next phase of their plan. There was no time to waste. They needed to get back to the ship and prepare for what was coming next. The battle had only just begun, but the Misfits were ready. This was their moment to prove that they were more than just outcasts. They were the ones who would change the fate of the galaxy. And the Dominion had no idea what was coming for them. "You underestimated Earth's Misfits," Jax said, his voice cold as ice. "And now, you pay the price." The Misfits had done it. Against all odds, they had defeated the Dominion leader. But the fight wasn't over yet. They could hear the sound of more Dominion ships descending from the sky, bringing with them more soldiers, more firepower. The Misfits had won this battle, but they knew the war was far from over. "We've bought ourselves some time," Maya said, her voice tight with urgency. "But we need to get out of here, fast." Jax nodded, signaling to the team. "We're not done yet, but we'll fight for as long as it takes. This is our fight now." With the Dominion leader subdued, the Misfits turned their attention to the next phase of their plan. There was no time to waste. They needed to get back to the ship and prepare for what was coming next. The battle had only just begun, but the Misfits were ready. This was their moment to prove that they were more than just outcasts. They were the ones who would change the fate of the galaxy. And the Dominion had no idea what was coming for them. "You said." The Misfits had come far. But as they soared through the stars, the sense of victory that once pulsed through them began to fade, replaced by the harsh reality that their fight was far from over. The Dominion's reinforcements had been taken out, but the true threat, the greater challenge, was yet to come. Their journey had only just begun. Jax stood by the cockpit window, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. His fingers tightened around the control panel as the ship glided smoothly through the galaxy, but his mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The mission they had just completed, successfully infiltrating and crippling one of the Dominion's key bases, had been monumental. It had sent a message. Earth's Misfits weren't to be underestimated. But Jax knew they couldn't afford to rest on their laurels. The Dominion was relentless, and this war was far from over. "Jax," Leah's voice broke through his thoughts. She entered the cockpit, her face serious. "You're thinking about the next fight, aren't you?" He turned toward her, meeting her gaze. Leah had been through so much. Once a quiet, unsure person, she had become one of the most formidable members of the team. "Yeah, I'm just thinking. We've hit them hard, but they won't stop. They'll regroup, they'll retaliate, and we have no idea what their next move is." Leah's lips tightened into a firm line, her eyes betraying the same concerns. "They'll keep coming, but so will we. We've survived this long, Jax. We can survive whatever they throw at us." Jax gave a short nod, but the weight of their situation still pressed heavily on his shoulders. He'd seen what the Dominion was capable of, and the threat they posed was far from over. "I know, but we need a plan. The sooner we strike again, the better. We can't give them a chance to regroup." Mia, who had been sitting at the navigation console, glanced over her shoulder. "I'm scanning the galaxy for any more Dominion activity," she said, her voice focused. "I've already intercepted some of their comms. They're looking for us. They've underestimated how much damage we've done, but it won't take long before they send out more fleets." Jax exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "We need to stay one step ahead of them. We can't let them catch us off guard." Ezra, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his tone calm yet resolute. We've already done the impossible. They expected us to fail, to fall apart under pressure. But we've proven them wrong. If we keep up the momentum, we'll give them a fight they'll never forget. Zane, always the optimist despite the odds, flashed a grin. And if they don't like it, they can try their luck against us. I'm all for showing them just how much we've got. The group shared a brief moment of camaraderie, their bond stronger than ever. They weren't just misfits anymore. They were a force to be reckoned with. They had taken down the Dominion leader, struck a blow to their forces, and sent a clear message. But they also knew the galaxy wouldn't give them an easy victory. Their enemies were vast, and the Dominion wasn't the only threat they would face. We have to find the heart of their operation, Jack said, turning back to face the team. Their command center. If we can take that down, we'll cripple their entire infrastructure, and we'll be the ones who control the battlefield. Mia quickly brought up a map of the galaxy, her eyes scanning the information with quick precision. There's a fleet gathering near the asteroid belt of Vereth. It's their supply line, and judging by the fleet's size, it's a central part of their operations. Jax didn't hesitate. We go there. We hit them hard, disrupt their supply chain, and send a message they'll never forget. Leah glanced at the rest of the team, her expression resolute. This won't be easy. They'll be expecting retaliation, but I don't think they're ready for what we can do. The Misfits nodded in agreement. They had faced impossible odds before, and they would do it again. This was their moment. They didn't have the resources of the Dominion, nor the overwhelming might of their fleets, but they had something far stronger: unity. They had each other, and that was enough. As the ship hurtled toward the asteroid belt, Jack sat back, his thoughts racing with what was to come. They were about to take on one of the most formidable empires in the galaxy. It would be dangerous, and the odds would be stacked against them. But they had no choice. If they wanted to survive, if they wanted to protect Earth, they had to keep fighting. They had to keep pushing forward. The Misfits had proven time and again that they were capable of greatness, and now they would show the galaxy just how powerful Earth's Misfits really were. The Dominion had made a grave mistake when they underestimated them, and soon the galaxy would feel the full force of that mistake.